Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Utah Stories Show. So today, the theme of our podcast is "The System is Rigged." And there's so many ways in which the system is rigged. It's hard to be able to cover all of these bases, but we're going to try to cover a few of them. We just had, this election happen, and we had a lot of weird things that happened during this election, a lot of things that happened in the last election cycle that were very weird. And apparently, if you question anything about the election now, you become an election denier. So that's another thing you're actually not supposed to be talking about. You're not allowed to even consider that the election might be fraught with problems, especially when like in Arizona, the Attorney General was actually placed in charge of the election, who was also running for governor against Kari Lake. And Kari Lake points out this obvious conflict of interest, and then she's labeled an election denier because you're not allowed to bring that up. And now, of course, when all the Republican ballots were supposed to come in for Kari Lake, and she was supposed to get over the top, she didn't make it because just sadly there weren't enough votes for her. And I don't know that that's some kind of rigging of the election or rigging of the system, but I think it's worthwhile to question it to see if there was an audit and if they could match every ballot to a person and not just trust that the system is completely without any problems at all. I think it would be a better idea if people questioned things. And so the same goes for COVID. I had my questions. I posed those questions. I got into a lot of hot water with a lot of people just because I had questions. But isn't that the job of the media? Shouldn't you have questions and shouldn't you try to be finding answers? I feel like that's my job. So being called a denier, whether it's COVID or elections or climate, I guess that's what I'm going to be called now because I'm a person who's supposed to ask questions. But with me on the program today is a guy who's asked questions regarding housing, and I'm really glad to have you on, Logan.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so you question, why is it that housing in Utah is so expensive and it's getting out of reach for the middle class? And tell me a little bit about your story of how you went down that rabbit hole and where you ended up.
Yeah, so I've done a lot of projects with infill, going through approvals with the local government at that level mainly. The biggest challenge we've had has been with the city of Centerfield down in Sanpete County, but it's not abnormal. It feels like every time that you go to work on a project in a city, you're going uphill. And when we talk about affordable housing and the issues around housing, it feels like the system, like you said, the system is rigged. Everything is focused on how does the government help large hedge funds, large super companies be the ones that build this multifamily housing. And to make it worse, they receive government subsidies to do it. So not only are they the ones that are building the new affordable housing, which are apartment complexes in Salt Lake County at $1,600 a month for a small little apartment, but they're getting government subsidies and tax credits and finding things out before anybody else does. That's actually really common.
And it's not affordable.
It's not affordable. So,
but they call it affordable.
Yeah, they call it affordable. Yeah, they call it affordable, but it's never been really affordable. But
they're getting money from the government.
Yeah.
And they're getting it under the auspices that this is going to help the community because it's going to be affordable housing. But
when you chase the money, it's really interesting. I mean, I believe there was a $50 million affordable housing grant, and it's really hard to find out where that all went. And on top of that, when you start looking at the approach to affordable housing, one of the really common beliefs is if we build housing in the medium tier and upper tier, they're going to leave the affordable housing and move up. And I'm sure there's some truth to that, but is that really the right way to do it? So we look at the affordable housing, like the affordable housing stock, for example, like mobile home parks. I I mean, we don't really have a lot of projects. I know in Provo, the big thing was the boulders for a long time. And, it's stigmatized. And they're run down. And then eventually somebody comes in, puts in, raises money in a fund and renovates the whole thing and then doubles the rent. And now it's no longer affordable. And I think there's a few different problems in there, but I think government is a major issue in this, and especially the relationship between government and big business. Mm-hmm. I think there's an unfair advantage. I mean, it would be the equivalent of tying your arms behind your back and playing basketball against a bunch of NBA players. These companies have full-time attorneys. They have full-time employees that all they do is look for these grants. And so it's not really a level playing field for anybody to go and do that. And on top of that, their job is to make money. So they're looking for any way they can to take advantage of the system. And I mean, just look at all the problems with lobbyists in Washington at the state level. I mean, you have it here where our lobbyists are receiving, our politicians are receiving donations from the billboard companies and, everybody under the sun. And they think, oh, this is great. This is part of the free market. But we're super far away from any type of free market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's what I've realized in all my years in reporting. You find that the laws that are being passed, a lot of them at the state legislature, they're actually pre-written. And you go back and you try to find out, okay, who actually wrote this law? Mm-hmm. And you find out that, the Home Builders Association of America has a national lobbying group who are writing laws for state legislatures to go in and have whoever they've given money to go bring it up into committee, pass it so that whatever new feature they want to have passed is going to pass. And that's just one example. Every single corporation in America that's publicly traded has a mechanism to pass the laws they need that pave the way so that they can ensure their shareholders get more consistent profit.
So where is the line, right? Because I think in some situations, these companies need to be able to have some type of representation of some sort.
Yeah, and I get it. I mean, I actually understand it from their standpoint, but from a legislative body whose job it is to represent us as citizens, but then they get a little taste of that power.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, man, I got to keep this seat. What did I do? I got to get more money for my campaign. Oh, these guys are giving me money. Oh, yeah, I'll do what they say.
Well, and the amount of money in politics is crazy. Mm-hmm. I mean, it makes you wonder when somebody's spending tens of millions of dollars for a seat in Congress when their wage is less than $200,000 a year.
Yeah.
That's not a good business plan.
Yeah.
There's something else going on, right?
Yeah.
And, I think this week Nancy Pelosi says she's not going to run again for the speaker, in the leadership position. And, it's fascinating. And I don't want to sound like I'm saying one side over the other, but she's a great example of the fact that she went in as a politician and she comes out as, being worth over $100 million on the low end. Yeah. And people have asked her, did your husband ever make stock trades based on the information you gave? And she says no. So, I want him to invest my money because I don't know how he's doing it, right? Taking a salary of $200,000 a year and turning it into $100-something million. Politicians, I have a lot of personal beliefs, but one of them is really they should not be able to make money in any way whatsoever, whether in office.
Yeah, her husband traded NVIDIA stock when she knew that they weren't going to get this giant government contract that was the impetus for him buying the NVIDIA stock in the first place. So they bought it when they were going to get this government contract. And then when that fell through, he sold it. That is absolutely insider trading. You should go to jail for that.
It feels like politics and politicians should look at what they do with a certain sense of, being sacred, right? They're representing us. They should be. It's a serious thing, but instead, it's really like, how do I play this game and win?
Yeah,
like they're on the same board playing against me, and they represent me. You know, I'm not really sure what the real solution is, and I know every time you go and you talk about it, people go and say, oh, maybe, you know, some right-wing person says maybe it needs to be a revolution. I'm like, yeah, I don't think we're there. I don't understand what would get us there. I made the comment to somebody about bread and circuses, right? Where the idea is if we're fed and we have entertainment, this is from Roman times, that, you know, the population won't rebel. Well, I think we're getting food and we have plenty of entertainment, more than you could ever watch in your entire life. So when you look at it that way, would people ever really get off their couch or out of their bed? I mean, we don't even want to go to work in the office anymore. Are people really going to get out and do anything besides text an angry text or put up an angry post? I don't understand here in Utah, for example. I don't understand why our politicians are not more vocal on certain things. I went and looked up today what was that crypto company called? FTX. So yeah. I went and typed in FTX and I typed in John Curtis to see if anything came up. Nothing. I typed in Mike Lee. Nothing. Typed in Mitt Romney. Nothing. And you know, that's kind of hard to see that $36 billion disappears, which is almost 3 times the lawsuit right now with that blood testing company.
Yeah, that is incredible.
Right? And she's in court right now. And what are they saying about him? Yeah. And Maxine Waters has pictures with this guy, and she's over the regulatory committee for finance.
Yeah, unbelievable. That is one of the most blatant examples of absolute government corruption and collusion into propping up a business that should have never been propped up so long. That should have never gotten all these investor dollars, all thanks to the Democratic donors. You said, did he gave something like, he was the biggest donor to the Democrat Party.
So I saw an article, I think it was in Fortune. Second biggest donor was the founder of FTX, this 30-year-old kid, right? And he comes out, and there's actually a text chain from a reporter for the Vox News. And there's a text chain with him. And it's pretty long, asking all these questions, one after another. And he admits that all this, you know, philanthropic, all this good he was doing was just for show. It wasn't real. It was to keep a good face for the business, to be able to raise more capital. And he says that everybody's doing it. So, and, you know, he calls out the FDA, he calls out all these different, you know, entities. And it's hard to look at that and not feel like we're getting ripped off.
Yeah. Yeah, and all those investors. And did you ever hear this guy from Utah who came up with the hydrogen semi-truck called Nikola?
Nikola, yeah. Yeah, I'm just happy they moved the factory down to Arizona and got out of here.
Yeah. But, I mean, this guy, he ripped off Wall Street for, I believe, something like $20 billion.
Yeah, he put a truck going downhill.
Yeah, he had the truck.
We're driving, baby. We're gonna make it.
I mean, that dude, he just basically wanted to say, yeah, this is like Tesla only with hydrogen, and if we can harness the power of hydrogen, we could power semi trucks in the cleanest way possible. And of course, investors love the idea. But there was no science. There was he didn't have anything but a fancy looking prototype.
And the problem comes down to what are people supposed to believe, right? So when you're trying to raise money, if you have a plan and you pitch it to your investors and that's really what the plan is, and the money goes to those things, you're following the rules. But if you are running a crypto exchange, borrowing $8 billion to go to another company that he has. And as of 2 weeks ago, he said, I just realized how much money had gone out. He was paying for his penthouse. He was paying for probably his private jet, everything. Right out, leveraging the exchange. And, you know, looking at this situation with him giving all this money to these Democratic candidates, and again, I'm not trying to be political. This could happen with any party. The problem is, we just found out about this after the midterms. How would you feel if you were a voter and you voted for somebody and you just found out that 50%, 10% of all of their funds they got was from a guy who had been stealing from people?
Yeah.
And that's who he's endorsing. That would make me think maybe I should double check this person to know how much they're in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the election's over.
But the other rigging of the system is like the biggest story that everybody needed to know in the presidential election, the last presidential, was the Hunter Biden laptop story.
Yeah. Which they're saying they're going to start investigating because they're Republicans
he's
to
now
control the House.
Absolutely under investigation, and this was fake news. This was banned on Twitter and banned on Facebook.
Same thing. Do you remember when COVID was happening and the lab leak theory?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right?
I remember Senator Cotton got up and said that theory, and everybody called him a kook in the media. Said this guy is so crazy. And
they kept saying that. And then magically, Trump's not reelected and Biden's in office. And they start talking about it again.
Yeah.
And
you're allowed to talk about it. You weren't even allowed to talk about it on social media.
And they never came up with a conclusive decision on where the virus actually came from. They never found the animal, right? And when they had other type of infections, they had found the animal very quickly. They didn't this time. In fact, China went in and they cleaned up the entire market and everything. So it's really suspicious. Kind of like your opening statement, it's okay to question things. One thing that's been really frustrating and kind of on my mind lately has been the whole Epstein thing. And when it first came out, I didn't want to dive into it because it seemed very like a conspiracy. Mm-hmm. But the guy died in jail. And then his girlfriend goes on trial, and it's all sealed. And this guy has pictures with every leader everywhere.
Yeah. And the number of times that Bill Clinton and Bill Gates went to that island, and that's all sealed. I guess that'll never come out.
But that's
the
not
extent of their
that's
relationship.
Not fair. That's not American. And I don't know why our representatives aren't saying something about it. Mm-hmm. That's what makes me mad is the fact that, so he's even got pictures with President Trump. So it's not something that's Republican or Democrat. The problem is we could have leaders right now that were exploiting children on an island, and we're voting for them and we don't know. And because they sealed that, we may never know. And that's wrong. Yeah. We need to have more transparency in who we're actually voting for and choosing. And it instead, we just, like in Utah, we just vote for Republican.
Well, the thing that I've come to understand in covering homelessness and talking to homeless people is there is this absolute double standard in our legal justice system. If you are poor and you commit a felony, unless you're so poor you don't have any money, yeah. You are going to get a huge penalty. You're going to get that felony on your record. It's going to get so hard to rent a house because that's going to be part of your criminal background check. That felony conviction is going to prevent you from getting a job. Mm-hmm. You're going to be pushed down and you're going to be told to stay down until you can get that felony expunged.
You really can't. I mean, and I think Utah passed a law recently where something's over a certain amount of years, and that there is some opportunity, but one of the problems that I see is we, especially here in Utah, where the majority of the population is LDS Christian, right? Mm-hmm. And if the majority of the population believes in Christ, then they also believe in repentance, and they believe in change, and they believe in all these things. It becomes very difficult to look at the justice system where you go right here and you say, I want to be forgiven of all of my sins. But then you go look on the other side and say, well, that person, I just don't think they've learned enough. Mm-hmm. They got to spend more time in jail or on parole or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And
or they don't deserve a second chance. It's
yeah.
and maybe they're not doing that explicitly, but they're complicit in it because this double standard of the law related to felonies. If you're rich enough to hire a really good attorney, you'll get it wiped off. You'll absolutely not have to suffer any consequences. And to see how Bill Gates was on this pleasure island, and he's still out there. Everybody thinks he's the COVID expert, and he's the expert for global climate change solutions, like putting some whatever kind of chemicals in our atmosphere. He's out there doing that, buying up thousands of acres of farmland.
Yeah, it's really difficult to look at all of these problems and say, well, what's the solution? And I think having leadership changing is pretty big. I mean, when I was voting this last election, I'm looking at these people that want to get reelected, and I'm thinking, I don't want anybody in. I want to get all new people, and maybe it'll be better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not Evan McMullen? That's what I was thinking. And then those negative campaign ads, I was like, well.
That was really interesting. They got really, really aggressive. I mean, both, but it was Mike Lee, right? Got really aggressive. And I mean, come on, we have all of these problems that we could talk about. And instead, they're going to go and say, well, this person said this and this person said this. And it's like, look, I don't care. I want you to get answers. Who was on that island with Epstein, who was breaking the law? I want you to get answers of why we have so much inflation.
Yeah.
They're going to keep raising rates forever.
Yeah. It's funny that nobody is talking about that. Nobody's talking about what is the cause of the inflation. And that the government did these lockdowns and send everybody's checks and then sent every big corporation giant checks
I
that they didn't need.
I heard a stat, and I don't know. You can fact check me on this, but I heard something like, when these checks started going out, like 2021, that 80% of all the currency that was ever in circulation was printed.
Yeah.
And it actually makes a lot of sense because you have the velocity of money when money changes hands. So, you sell me a car for $20,000 and then I go and fix your roof. We created $40,000, right? If the roof was $20,000. And then that money, but I didn't have to print $40,000. We had, you had 20 and then you gave it to me and then I went and, did the roof. So it was the same 20, but now all of a sudden you have all this money. Right now, our issue is low growth, but lots of capital. There's not really places to put it. You have these mega companies. I heard at one time that, and this was probably a year or two ago, that Berkshire Hathaway was sitting on $180 billion. I mean, he's buying every utility company he can. Warren Buffett, right?
Yeah.
And Apple's sitting on hundreds of billions. They don't even know where to put the money.
They want to do stock buybacks for that reason.
Yeah, they want to keep buying these companies back.
They believe their stock is going to do better than inflation. You don't want to keep it in cash.
Which, I mean, I hate to go down this conspiracy idea, but I've come to the realization that there's either two options. The government knows exactly what they're doing, or they have no idea what they're doing. And it's not in the middle. Because think about everything with COVID. They sent all these checks out. Oh, everybody's got to stay home, right? And then they go and take steps forward. I mean, when you get sick in the past, it's like, okay, if you have an immune issue, you stay home. Well, now it's like, no. We got to stop this thing from spreading. Okay, so now I'm staying home. Anybody in service industries is basically not working because they can't be around anybody. We all have to wear masks. And then they go and send all this money. Hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Trillion? Over $1 trillion? I don't know. More than the bailout of the banks. And then we're all sitting at home spending money. So the money is actually almost doubled, right? Because it's not just what was spent, but we went and bought goods with it and got value, and then we went and gave the money to some company. But look,
mostly Amazon.
Yeah.
I mean, the Amazon stock price just shot through the roof.
But where does the money end up? Where does it really end up?
With the elite, with the wealthy.
Big banks, the wealthy. So all of us that got checks, And then what happens? They go and they raise rates. So who ends up getting the money? The Fed, right? Because they raise interest rates and they collect it through interest. But who runs the Fed? The banks.
Yeah.
So now not only are we borrowing at crazy rates in our country, but we're paying more for it. The Fed gets more money, which is really the banks, who really can't go under, right? I mean, Lehman Brothers was an anomaly, and I don't think it was actually. I think it was more they didn't like them. I don't know.
You got thrown under the bus.
Yeah, they got thrown under the bus. They had to blame somebody. But now, yet it was 2 days ago. So in October was one of the announcements, and then 2 days ago. 2 days ago, J.P. Morgan announced a partnership with Haven Homes, $1 billion fund, to build for-rent communities of single-family homes.
Really?
And last month, I think they're backed by Blackstone or BlackRock, Invitation Homes, who already owns 85,000 homes, announced they were going to go and buy another $1 billion of homes. You know, we're all these buyers here, we're all freaked out, right? We're, oh my gosh, interest rates are so high. Well, guess what? These guys are coming with all the cash that we got from stimulus. And now they're going to go and raise that money, put it together, and buy houses that now we're going to end up renting. And all the builders who are dumping inventory are now going to start building for them. And we're going to have more rentals, less owner-occupied opportunities.
Yeah.
And that'll just continue to happen.
Yeah, and when I look at this big picture of our finances, the banking industry, and what's going on, the wealth is going into the hands of fewer people.
Yeah.
The wealth is getting consolidated
concentrated.
more and more and more. I mean, you look at, like, behind you, the picture of Main Street, and I've been studying Main Street since I started the idea of Utah Stories. The best thing about a Main Street is you've got owner-occupied buildings, and the owner owns the building. Mm-hmm. He owns the land under his feet, and so early on, it's a big struggle probably to pay that mortgage. But then after 30 years in business, he's got a building. And if he doesn't pass on the business to his kids, he can rent that building and he can retire.
Or rent to the kids and the kids take over the business, or
it's right? And to me, that's what created the vibrancy in our economy. Mm-hmm. This ability to not just start a business, but actually own the building that your business is in, and then use that as your retirement. And the same goes for your house.
The United States was founded on the principles of owning real estate, because in a lot of other countries you couldn't own anything.
Yeah, and if you look at, like, Germany, I was talking about this. Mm-hmm. My in-laws, they tried to go back to Bosnia. It didn't work out in Bosnia. There's no jobs there. There's hardly any economy. So they go to Germany, where they have this robust, amazing economy, the best economy in Europe. They're able to get great jobs. But in Germany, it's almost impossible to own an apartment or a house because it is so scarce, and it's scarce by design. And they're able to have, lots of rentals that are occupied, but they want to preserve their open space. They want to make sure the housing stays where it's at. And now we see that here. Yeah. I mean, we see the monopoly of land and this hardcore Euclidean zoning, which just mandates that every single house be built on an eighth of an acre, and that you can't deviate from this schematic that they've built. And finally, we see, this. I don't know if you know, the tiny home village was passed but this has taken now 3 years since initiation.
And I'm really curious to see how it goes, especially because I believe it's still being run by the government. So I'm kind of skeptical. It's fascinating because we look at these bigger economies. When you mentioned Germany, in Europe, you have Germany, who has had this trade surplus for decades. And you look at some of the other countries in the European Union, like Spain or Italy, who have unemployment rates for I think some age groups at 20+%, or in the high teens. And, it's interesting because even you look here about different demographic trends that we're facing, or, all the manufacturing jobs that have left that have gone over to China, and now they have a trade surplus. And but this push towards a type of conformity. The ironic part about what you're talking about with this certain types of zoning, and this is how you have to do it, and these planned unit developments, where are all of the homes that are not in a planned unit development? They're in the rich communities. They're the custom homes. They're multi-million-dollar houses.
Yeah.
Again, you follow the money, right? It's interesting because.
But don't you think we could solve this affordable housing problem overnight if we just got rid of zoning laws?
So in Houston, everything's conditional. And
meaning,
I mean, you can go and propose anything anywhere.
You can do almost anything.
I mean, you can propose it. They still have to go through approvals on it. I think when it comes to zoning, the issues that I see are the restrictions on the accessory apartments or even occupancy. I know a lot of people get really sticky about that, but when you have houses that are next to like a school like BYU or the U or any of that, if you can be safe, it needs to be a safety approach.
Yeah.
If you have a family, the law says you can basically have as many people in that house as you can fit beds against a wall. But if you have 4 students in a house, you're not conforming. You're breaking the law. So what does it do to all the pricing of all the student housing? It goes up.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting where we look at our resources that we have right now and how they're used, and we start thinking, well, there's a house that has 5 bedrooms, but I can only legally rent it to 3 people. I mean, that's just silly. It just doesn't make sense.
And if you look at the turn of the century, in New York, they had tenement housing, and that was a lifesaver to people who just arrived in Ellis Island, had nothing, and needed to just save up money. You could get a room. It had just a room, and then you would share your bathroom. You'd share your kitchen space. And you could rent a place for super, super cheap.
Most cities, I can't actually think of any that would allow this, will not allow they call them different things, studio apartments, efficiency units. They have a minimum square footage. Or what they do is they say, yeah, you can go and put in studio units, but every studio unit needs to have 2 to 3 parking spaces.
Yeah.
So now the project doesn't make sense anymore. It's not profitable. And that cost, if you do build them, gets passed on to the people that are renting or that, the renters they end up buying them, but they probably end up renting them. So now they're paying for 3 parking spaces. What if they drive a bike? Yeah. They still pay for 3 parking spaces. We don't have enough variety in our housing to solve people's problems because of how rigid zoning laws are. And it's frustrating. And I mean, we talked about the law that Mike Lee's trying to pass, where he's trying to make it so we can take federal land and use it for affordable housing. But that's a great idea. I don't think it has anything to do with housing.
No. I mean, we have plenty of land.
There's
so much empty land in Utah. It's not a land issue. It's a building cost issue.
It's a building cost issue. It's a poor infrastructure issue. It's an issue. I mean, we can say water. We've gone down that road talking about water. But
well, let's talk about your case.
Yeah.
So we did a little short documentary two months ago. You're trying to build in Centerfield, which is outside of Gunnison. Absolutely huge need for affordable housing there.
We get calls all the time. I don't even have signs. I don't even know where they get my number.
Yeah,
I get calls.
Just crazy. I mean, there's a prison there, and there's all these people working there. They want affordable housing. Everybody wants your development to work.
I don't think that's unique to that area either. I think that's rural Utah, and maybe even rural America outside any major metro areas.
Yeah.
Where the builders build in the metro areas, and so you don't ever get real housing inventory. And what is built is really expensive.
And the city probably mandates that you be on 2 acres.
Yeah, and then exactly. They have the laws that say you have to have a certain type of acreage, usually like a half acre or
and a septic system, or if you tie into the sewer and you're going to pay another huge expense to be on the grid.
I mean, my impact fee quote in Daniel, right next to Heber, to connect to culinary for 1 mobile home space was over $10,000.
Jeez.
That's not putting the infrastructure in. That is paying for the right to tap into it. So if I was to go and connect that whole mobile home park down there to the city's water, I have to pay over about $110,000.
That's in Daniel, Utah?
Daniel, Utah, right next to Heber, right? It's the first right-hand turn after Charleston, right over there.
That's another boom town, Heber.
And I mean, it's fascinating because you look at it, and you just think, well, I mean, I have a hard time too with the idea that we pick and choose what we want to use our water for. And the majority, by far, almost 90% of our water goes to agriculture. And we talked about the alfalfa alfalfa, I think, is close to 40% of the agricultural water is used, the consumption for water. And almost half of that is being exported overseas.
Yeah, that's insane.
And, I actually called multiple congressmen about this. Not a single one has called me back. I called Mike Lee's office, which is connected to Mitt Romney's office to handle calls. I don't even Stewart down there in Washington County, and they also touch Senator Phil and Gunnison. Never called me back. I called the state senator that's a professor at Snow College. He never called me. He emailed me, opened my email, never even responded.
Yeah.
So
going back to your story. Yeah. So just to recap, you're ready to go. You got the units. Yeah. You invested in this beautiful road. We'll play the clip. In the recorded version.
I mean, I even have now 2 homes set, which means they're connected to utilities, skirted, have stairs, and all I have to do is get a building permit from the city, which the city doesn't even inspect it. It's the county. The city just collects the $50 fee.
Yeah.
And all I have to do is flip a switch, and it's habitable.
Yeah, so basically the city said no. The city put a moratorium on it.
Yeah.
I talked to the current mayor. I talked to the previous mayor. There is a legitimate concern there because the spring that they're drawing from is 9 miles out of town. That spring only has a certain capacity. The spring fills up a tank. The tank only has a certain capacity. In August, the previous mayor explained it a lot better. Mm-hmm. In August, the lawns get dry and the spring is not running as strong, so the tank's not refilling as fast. So basically they need a bigger tank, they need a bigger line.
But even talking about what we choose to use water for. The lawns get dry, right?
But that's the secondary water. And so people are allowed to use culinary water on their lawns, but they're not using culinary water at all for the other months of the year. So if they just put a moratorium on culinary water usage in August, like don't use any culinary water because that's our backup water, and just let the lawns go dry, you could have your 40 units there.
We're zero-scaped.
Yeah.
We don't even use secondary water on all of the new 18 spaces. And it's crazy to me because they have one of the largest pumpkin farms in the state down there. I mean, it's
all agriculture.
I look at the use of water. We could use alfalfa as a synonym for just about anything, right? In a way, alfalfa is just another way of saying you're watering your lawn, right? I mean, we're not getting a benefit. Economically, it's such a small impact. It's less than 1% of the GDP, but it takes up so much water.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Great Salt Lake drying up. Well, maybe we should look at farming in a smarter way. They farm in Israel.
Yeah.
Right? So we pick and choose what we want, but you have families that can't find a place to live. You have families that are living in cars, that have jobs.
Yeah, when you look at it in that perspective, that this secondary water, which there's tons of, like the one spring there is the culinary water. The secondary water, there's a ton of it. And I said, well, what about a filtration plant for the secondary water? Oh, well, that's really expensive. That's a big deal to put in a filtration system.
Well, it's funny though that they say that, because why didn't they give that to us as an option to add a filtration system on our new portion? Because people have wells, and they also have. It's not that common to have mobile home parks with wells. I have a mobile home park with a well in Daniel, and there's a lot of parks that have filtration systems on the water.
Oh, really? That would be my next question. Why not put in like a water tank and get one of these tankers if you need it to come and fill in the water tank.
I think it's lots of complaints, little care, and little care to actually want to give solutions.
Yeah.
A lot of these politicians look at the what's in the box and say, yeah, this is what it is, instead of actually saying, how do we fix problems? Water really is not a problem on our planet if you think about it anywhere. Like we look at lack of rain and things like that, but we use water really poorly. We just really do. I mean,
we do.
We use it poorly, and even when we look at, the Mississippi is going down right now, but you look at like leaks and stuff, right? Have you ever had a leak at your house? Did they call you and say, hey, you're using way more water than you probably should be? Did they knock on your door? No, they don't. They would rather just waste 100,000 gallons.
The perfect example in Utah is you go all through the suburbs, all throughout the Wasatch Front, every single lawn, giant green lawn.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, okay, because water's cheap. We got the Wasatch Range. It comes down. But then you go to a place like Henderson, Nevada. We go there a lot. They doubled their population in the last 5 years while decreasing their water usage by 50% because they just said no lawns.
Mm-hmm.
You want a lawn, you can have it, but it's going to be a plastic product that you don't have to water.
I still remember growing up in California and them telling me, you need to shut your, don't take long showers, and when you're brushing your teeth, you got to turn off your sink. And then it came out that agriculture is huge in California, and bad watering practices also, and they were using like 96%, 98% of all the water used in California was going to agriculture. My turning off the sink has such a little impact. Maybe it makes me fall asleep better at night thinking that I just saved the planet, but that's a lie. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's politics, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the issue. I'm going to go tell you all these things to make you feel like you're saving the planet, to make you feel like you're a good person, and at the same time, we're not going to address any of the problems. Yeah. So the next time that I run for election, I can talk about all the great things we did, and I can still...
that electric vehicle tax credit I gave you, and the
which we're paying for through taxes.
Yeah.
And what's interesting too, we talk about homelessness. Yeah, they go and they do this village. They do the village, and yet every new real project that they're doing is pretty much subsidized. Any major apartment complex, it's not for sale. They don't even push these builders to go and do condos. In fact, I think a lot of times the cities think, apartments, that's going to be better. It'll be easier to enforce rules on them, right? They're going to have on-site management. Well, now you've set it up in a situation where you're not allowing people to build wealth. You're not allowing people to, like the example you gave with the commercial space. You pay the business down, right? The space. You're not allowing them to do that. And mobile home parks are kind of an in-between space on there, where people are able to own something and pay a cheaper lot rent. We have lot rent in one of our parks it's $225 a month, and it includes water, sewer, and trash.
Wow.
That's
great.
Yeah,
that's what I don't get. It's like, so I go around interviewing these homeless people, and I talk to them about the housing. Like, a lot of them are waiting to get into housing, but then a lot of them say, you know what, I'd just like a cheap place I can rent out, like even build my own tiny house. Like, these guys started saying, yeah, I would build my own tiny house. I'd go get the 2x4s and the plans, and I'm a good carpenter, because people want to have ownership.
Yeah.
People don't want to have an overseer, and I think that's something that's forgotten when you talk about these far left policies. This idea that the Great Reset, you're going to own nothing and you're going to be happy.
Yeah.
That's really the road we're going down, especially with what you talked about earlier. The big banks are so cash rich right now.
Right?
And these giant
as everybody
corporations.
Else is scared. I mean, it's just a repeat of, it's actually, we can look at 07, 08 and be like, well, was that actually an accident? Whatever, right? But it's really hard to look at what we're in now and say that it wasn't, orchestrated.
Yeah.
And when you think about that,
especially didn't they pass a law? I was trying to look this up. Wasn't it illegal for giant investment banks to own single-family homes before 07, 08? Wasn't that
possibly that would
a toxic
not
debt
surprise me.
relief plan, part of that TARP plan, to allow all that toxic debt to get bought up? And I believe that was I tried to find that, but I couldn't find it again.
Invitation Homes bought almost 100,000 homes,
and BlackRock bought.
They backed them. They backed Invitation Homes, and you have companies like American Homes for Rent, which are really fronts for J.P. Morgan. And American Homes for Rent basically goes in and says, "Oh, you want to buy a house? You can't qualify yet. We're going to do a lease option, and then when you're ready, you can buy the house." They have their fees and stuff. The problem is less than 10% actually buy. So they're just more renters, and just a way to get in front of people and make it seem like they're helping. And I know I just have a hard time when we're looking at these problems, and I want to say, where's Mike Lee? Where's John Curtis? Where's Mitt Romney?
This is a national issue, and I, as you know, I got super excited when Mike Lee's comms director told me he'd love to talk about affordable housing. And apparently he wouldn't like to talk about it with me because that was like, oh, I'm so grateful. Let's schedule a time. Yeah, we'll figure it out. And then he never came on. But he's a busy guy. I understand. But the point is, this is a huge.
Help the election for him a little bit,
Well, in the end, he was fine. But you just look at this. You just look at this widening divide, and I feel like. The reason why I feel like this is such an important issue is I look at my ancestors who migrated from Armenia. They had nothing. They were completely destitute. They had they didn't even have 2 nickels to rub together. But they come here in Salt Lake City. They work their butts off. My great-grandfather dug ditches. I mean, that was just his occupation, ditch digger. And they bought little tiny rental properties after they paid off their home. And my great-grandma was an amazing landlord, and she helped other immigrants get their start. And it was through this wealth-building mechanism of just owning a little bit of property, paying it off, buying another one, that allowed them to raise 6 very successful children who really appreciated living in America, where you could climb up this ladder and really succeed, and they all did. And so my grandpa was a great success, bought a bunch of real estate, started a steel company. And it's like this American dream is so contingent upon there being rungs in this ladder. Yeah. And if you pull out those rungs at the bottom and you just say, they're poor people, what can you do? I think it screws up the whole system.
People are willing to sacrifice to get somewhere. There are lots of people that way. And the government needs to do everything possible to make it so the people that want to work hard can get there. And not everybody I'm not saying you have to get in the hustle and bustle of all the craziness. I'm just saying if you really want to someday be able to actually retire and not be on Social Security or depend on Social Security, that should be an option by working hard. Yeah. But we basically made it so we're all going to be renters. I mean, there's only so many builders. We weren't even building enough homes before they raised rents. Yeah. So we're still short tens of thousands of homes in Utah. And now the whole system that was used to build those homes is collapsing because they raised rates and now the builders are sitting on inventory. I heard, this is a few weeks ago, I heard that Richmond American Homes was sitting on 70 spec homes in Utah County. Maybe that was Utah and Salt Lake, and I'm not really sure. But even when you look at that, that's a lot of money. And they're a national builder. So what's going to happen when those don't sell for a while? Well, not only will it absorb capital, which goes eventually to the Fed, right? Because in one way or another, it's borrowed. And so we're basically setting ourselves up to really damage our economy, but break down these systems where the large companies come in and own the housing stock.
Well, one thing I thought of, so all of these luxury apartments that are in the midst of being built downtown Salt Lake and all the ones slated to be built, do you think there's going to be a a halt to some of the construction, and some of these places will go into foreclosure? Or do you think they'll find buyers? What do you think's going to happen?
Well, the people that have money, even when the market's bad, still have money. So that's the argument with luxury housing. There's always a supply demand for housing stock, and I think the real need is on the bottom.
Because I thought, what if these luxury apartments end up, the prices fall big time, and maybe they become affordable? Is that a possibility?
Well, if you're in a room full of people and everybody's got a different amount of money, as prices go down, people will be able to afford it. So the idea to get to affordable housing, I think I saw something that was saying that they're going to have a apartment or a penthouse in one of those units that's going to be renting for $15,000 a month.
Jeez.
So they probably can't make the money. I mean, they would have to lose it. Somebody had to buy it being restructured, and then they can maybe say, oh, I can make it more affordable. Now instead of 15, it's 5. Or something.
It's hard to imagine prices it'll happen again like it did in 2008. I can't.
But also, look what happened during COVID. Who paid the rent? The government.
Mm-hmm.
The government was more than willing to go and pay rent.
Yeah.
And I don't think these tenants were saving it.
No.
I mean, maybe they used it to pay off debt. Maybe they used it to do something. But we're Americans. I don't think any American really decides I want to save a bunch of my money. I just don't see that. People, that's the other issue too. Like, we rely so much on credit, and rates are higher now. So how long can the Fed really keep rates as high as they are? We are, within 6 months, we will be feeling this so strongly. I mean, you already have all these tech layoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when these tech layoffs happen, one of the things with the tech layoffs, a lot of them have been foreign workers. Probably from countries like India, right? In the tech space, the H-1 visas.
Yeah.
They have a certain amount of time to get a new job. So what's going to happen to those people? Now they're going to go and work really hard if they want to stay here, lower the amount that they're willing to work for to get a job to stay here, which now is going to lower the price of all of these workers and their salaries. And I don't think people in tech are realizing that this silent quitting and all this stuff. And so you're going to have people making less money in a time of inflation when housing is extremely tight. And where are they going to live?
Yeah.
I mean, if you end up making $60,000 or $70,000 a year, I think the median income in Utah is still just under $60,000 a year. I mean, I looked up $350,000 houses. Say there's 7 homes for sale under $350,000 in Salt Lake and Utah County.
Jeez.
And the payment is almost $3,000 a month.
Yeah. Yeah, well, regarding the labor issue, I guess we'll find out pretty soon if there's a true labor shortage when all these people get laid off and actually might need to work.
I saw an article saying that there's 1.4 million women that didn't go back to the workplace because there's not enough childcare options.
Yeah.
So, we have these problems. I just don't really see real local leadership tackling them, and it's only going to get worse. A lot of people are making a lot of money building real estate right now that are rentals. And if you can create more and more panic and more shortage, their rents will go up. They don't want affordable housing. They want you to depend on their housing, and they want the government to subsidize you. And they get it, and we pay for it as taxpayers. Conspiracy? I don't think so. I don't know,
Yeah, I mean, I guess the next phase of the plan of the Great Reset would be government pays everybody's rent, and the robots take over the factories, and everybody stays home entertained, and they're eating their popcorn.
Yeah, we're happy, right?
Yeah, we're good.
But I don't think people want that, and I don't think most Americans want that. I think a lot of us are entrepreneurs. We want to make things
the
better.
problem is you and even the homeless people absolutely understand this. You lose all of your freedom. Mm-hmm. You can't say the truth anymore.
Yeah.
You can't speak your mind anymore. Anything you do or say is now being monitored, and Big Brother is going to be watching you all the time. And if you don't comply, you're kicked out. I did a story about one homeless guy. He said all the wrong things. Like, he is the most obnoxious man I've ever met in my life. And man, he was, I got so irritated being around him. But he was still, you shouldn't get kicked out of a place, subsidized housing facility, just because you're obnoxious. Mm-hmm. And he got kicked out, Grace Mary Manor, and he was told by the people running that place, you will be homeless for a very long time. And he said, I can't get a job because if I get a job, I lose my Social Security check. And there's a lot of homeless people in that boat. They are afraid to get jobs. Mm-hmm. They're afraid to work long term because their checks depend on them not working.
If you really want to grow the economy, add manufacturing, grow America, you put policies in place that encourage people to work.
Yeah.
No matter what. Even if they're getting Social Security, they're over a certain age, right? I mean, they're getting it, or they're on disability. But if somebody on disability has figured out how to do some work online, and they're going to pay taxes on their income, why are we saying, no, if you work too much? You can look at the same thing
because there's opposing systems.
You have opposing systems. And people should be encouraged to work no matter what age they are. I don't want to say they have to, but if they want to, they should be encouraged to. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, you can even look at it with subsidies. They talk a lot about minorities and how the marriage rates have dropped because if they get married, now they get less money in subsidies, so go have kids. And yeah, that's broken, right? Mm-hmm. That's broken. It doesn't work. And we basically incentivize people to not work.
Yeah.
And to not get married, to not have to have a bunch of kids.
To be in a single parent household.
Yeah.
That's incentivized.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the great Milton Friedman said the most basic economic principle that applies to almost everything. Anything you want more of, you subsidize. Anything you want less of, you tax.
Yeah.
And if we just simply followed that principle, we could eliminate homelessness.
But a lot of times the real outcome is not that they're trying to eliminate homelessness, not that they're trying to make it better. They're trying to get reelected.
Yeah.
And
they're trying to appear compassionate.
Yeah.
And compassionate is creating a class of people who are dependent upon you for their
Bush
living.
Jr. got called out on this during his reelection, where he expanded Medicare.
Yeah. Medicaid plan.
Yeah, and it was, it cost a lot of money. And, it's basically like, what are these people willing to do to get votes? I was telling somebody, it's like getting a shot in the arm. It's a steroid. Yeah, just give them a shot. Just get past the election. We'll get past the election, and then we're going to have this big scandal about some cryptocurrency exchange that's going to, lose $36 billion. And then we're going to, let's just get past it. People will forget by the next election.
Yeah.
But we don't have people in our government talking about this stuff. We don't have...
Nobody's tracking down where COVID came from.
But even mayors.
Yeah.
Why as a community, if somebody representing a city, why can't they say, hey, I'm going to press our congressman every day until something changes, whatever the issue. Mm-hmm. If it's a federal issue. I got the runaround from everybody basically saying, well, that's the city issue. That's not us at the state level. That's not us at the federal level. That's not us at this level. You got to go and talk to them at that level. And that tells me that they're more worried about being elected and staying elected than actually changing something in the community.
Yeah, nobody wants to be accountable for that.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you talking about all this stuff. We covered a lot of bases. I said there was a lot of bases to cover when it comes to the system being rigged.
Yeah.
And you could go on and on and on. But I think the point is that people need to stop being so apathetic. People need to realize we have a sphere of influence. Mm-hmm. And if you look more locally, you can actually move the needle a little bit.
Yeah.
But as you just believe that Fox News or CNN has all the answers and all the news, you are eliminating yourself from the conversation or from the ability to make any difference at all. Mm-hmm. So I just encourage people, go out, get to know your city council, get to know your community council, get involved locally, and know what's going on around you, because there's no sense in just spending all your attention in this information age on what's going on with Donald Trump, what's going on with January 6th, what's going on in Washington.
With the Kardashians. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean that's just
what's
what we
going
live,
on
right?
on TikTok. Like, stop eating the popcorn and stop your TikTok feed, because there's more going on to life than that. And so with that, I encourage everybody to subscribe to Utah Stories Magazine, hyperlocal journalism. Your subscription goes right to our amazing team of writers who do incredibly awesome local journalism. We have just so many awesome stories in this month's issue. Cold War, hot town. This was about Moab during the Cold War. Moab was in a uranium mining boom town. We have a story about Helper, Utah, and story about downtown Salt Lake City's Main Street, including the brothels that used to exist there. This was a really interesting article by Dave Jensen. He researched, there was a whole brothel industry, and it was regulated by the government until the 1960s. And then I wrote a story about the rapidly changing face of downtown Salt Lake City, about the small businesses that are on the street still making their way. And it's been really fun to produce this issue. It's been great talking to you, Logan.
Yeah, happy
Best of luck. So when will you find out if your affordable housing is going to get the moratorium lifted?
That's the real question. I the mayor told me they keep adding extra steps. So now we have a planning and zoning commission. You got to go through them. I asked him who's in the committee and who do I need to talk to. Never responds. So, it's interesting to see, but we are pressing forward with. Hopefully, it will be some type of settlement where the city comes and realizes that this needs to happen, that we've agreed on it, that they've approved the project, and we can make this work.
Yeah.
Or they're going to have to pay some money, right? I mean, it's
good.
I mean, we can go and invest in affordable housing somewhere else. But, you have these homes, brand new homes sitting there that are ready to go.
$100,000 homes for sale in
that one's actually
Centerfield.
$95,000.
Wow.
So, I mean, I don't know where else you find anything like that in the state of Utah that's not uninhabitable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, best of luck to you, man.
Thank you.
All right. And if you do want to subscribe, I didn't say, go to utahstories.com, hit the subscribe button, or you can subscribe to our free digital newsletter. We'll send you one single email. It's our newsletter every single week, and that is absolutely free. And with that, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.